Tadashivat Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Param Ishvaro Guratmeti Mochibeda Vibhagine Vyomabda Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Sabhavedanta Siddhanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanandam Tati Guru Pranatoshimaham Om Om Shanti Shanti Om Namaste. Welcome to our Tripura chapter 16. But I just remember here that we have this Lynn has sent us this passage on the Gita, on the transcriptions of Swami Dayananda. It's too small. Well, I'm not going to read it. I guess you guys have read it. I read it as well. I'm going to just condensate what Dayananda is telling us there. There are two vritis. I mean, as we know, when we come to Vedanta, we want samadhi. There are basically three kinds of samadhis now: a natural state or natural samadhi, like sahaja samadhi, and then we have savikalpa, and then we have nirvikalpa. So when we come to Vedanta, our samadhi is a different kind of samadhi. It's not savikalpa samadhi in the common sense, because there should be almost no effort so that we could say, I have entered the field of Vedantic samadhi. Vedantic samadhi is just to stay, to hold the mind on certain vritis, and the vritis are just vritis about the nature of Atma, your very nature. So you hold your mind with that until, in the beginning, it takes effort, and then we could say it's savikalpa samadhi, the state you need to effort to keep your mind around those vritis. And then later on, it becomes more natural and spontaneous. And then there is no effort involved. When there is no effort, we say, and then you are in the nirvikalpa samadhi, which is you are holding the thoughts around the nature of the Atma, which is this your very nature, without effort, because you have developed such a huge vasana that that vrit, rather than being produced between the aham and idam, because every time we recognize an object, there are two vritis according to what Dayananda is writing there. So one vrit is the thought of the object. And as we know, the thought of object and the object, they are the same thing. Okay, so the object appears simultaneously with the thought of the object. And that appears only because there is another vrit making that possible, which is the aham. So we have aham, and then we have the world, and which comes together with the thought, the world, and aham. So there are two vrits involved in any recognition of phenomenal objects. And Dayananda was saying, in the case of self-knowledge, you don't need two vritis. You just need one vritti. And the one vritti is aham. But then this aham vritti, which is not running to contact anatma, is aham. And if it runs to the body-mind, and then it went to the anatma and identified with anatma, and that is not self-knowledge. So you are still trying to understand yourself. There is aham, but it still drives you to the body-mind structure, your psychology, and your thoughts, your states of mind. But when this aham is held without running to the anatma, remains aham as the atma, as consciousness, and for that we need certain vrittis, because empty mind, no? Or tranquil or silent mind without any vritti is not going to produce self-knowledge. For self-knowledge, we need vrittis, okay? So, and how this vrit happens? It's a vrit that is not associated with anatima. It's not associated with the tree, with the bird, with the chicken, with anything, you know? So, and then you have aham, I am, yeah, I exist, I am, and then I remain, yeah, contemplating on the features about the Atma as revealed by the Upanishads. So aham, and then immediately the teachings, they have strong impressions in my mind, and I begin remembering, recollecting the teachings and the pointers and the declarations, and so I remain in that. So this is basically the profound samadhi, the effort to hold until it becomes effortless, and then we, that should lead to sahaja samadhi, because sahaja samadhi is when you don't need to make an effort to remember the nature or the features around your very atma. Yeah. So and those thoughts are not necessarily anymore present, because they are properly stored in the causal body. Yeah? And then the yani is going to experience a mental state which is referred to as sahaja samadhi, which is a natural samadhi without any effort, without even having to rely on recollection of the declarations or the teachings of the Upanishads. So what Dayananda was trying to say is there are two vrittis. One is in respect to anatima, an object of anatima, and then if we observe, there is another vritti backing up that, which is the aham. Huh? So the aham needs to somehow, like this passage says, needs to eliminate everything from anatima. So to remain totally totally focused on its very nature as presented by the Upanishad. So what it means to say is that you cannot go into Vedantic samadhi without the teachings. Oh no, I want to go into deep meditation about the Atma, for example. No, I want to go into deep contemplation about the self. And then the first question is, but have you heard about the self? Have you studied the nature of the self? Because if you haven't gone through the Shravana, how are you going to meditate on the nature of the self? You understand? So we need the body of knowledge, which is revealed knowledge in respect to the nature or the features of our very nature as consciousness, as Brahman. So if I want to go into the Vedantic samadhi, Vedantic profound meditation, so I need to have Shravana. So you cannot do Vedantic samadhi, let's say, without Vedantic Shravana, because you cannot meditate on something unless you have heard and studied, and and now you want to make that knowledge firm and clear, because there is a huge benefit in knowing your true nature. So it brings us back again and again to the fact that self-knowledge has nothing to do with anything else besides knowledge. It's about knowledge, it's about knowledge, it's about knowledge. Although sometimes I like to point to the fact that there is a certain experiential element to self-knowledge. Because as we know, I mean, let's look at the sunlight. We have our sunlight here. Yeah. So can we experience sunlight? Yes. Usually we discount it because it's so obvious. Yeah? It's what reveals everything we see during the day, yeah? Or even the night when we turn on the light. So we discount the light. But if we really bring our mind to light, And then we can switch it on and off, and say, oh no, I'm experiencing light and darkness, light and darkness. So we can experience light as the illumining and revealing principle that allows us to see all the shapes and colors of objects. So we experience light. So now, in which way we can experience consciousness? So everything we experience, like Mark was saying before, is pointing to the fact that there is consciousness, which is allowing me to experience anything. If we keep that in mind, so we're going to direct consciousness from it hits the anathema object and then immediately send it back to hold this knowledge, that I am the only reality, I am consciousness, and I'm not the mind, I'm not the vrits in respect to the namarupas. I'm the consciousness that reveals all those vrits, but fundamentally, I don't need any of these things, although if my mind is extroverted and it keeps going out, and then I have to trick the mind, and I'm going to use all these thoughts that come, because the thoughts and the object, they're not much different. We have the objects in here, or the objects are out there, and then they pop in our mind. So if my mind is extroverted, so we have to trick the mind and say, let's do a sadhana here of turning the mind back to the source by which the thoughts and objects appear, are revealed. So this is a trick. But suppose the mind is very, very calm, tranquil, and you experience almost no vritis, no thoughts, and then there is beautiful silence and so on. And then as far as self-knowledge, there is an experience of consciousness. You experience consciousness, but you don't know what it is. Why we say that it's easier to recognize consciousness when the mind is not too extroverted or active? Because it's easier to see, that light of consciousness when it's not reflect on the object. When it reflects on thoughts, we tend to see the thoughts and not see the light. When in the absence of thoughts and objects, which are the same thing, so we have a better chance to see the light. But if we have a vasana, Vedantic vasana, to look for consciousness, otherwise we remain there looking for what? For silence, for peace, for empty, absence of thoughts, which is very pleasant experience. So all of that to say that when we come to Vedanta, we need to disregard emptiness or silence or totally pacified mind, and that we need to use a pacified mind. Many people are going to think, but this is going to disturb the peaceful mind. No, you need to produce a very silent mind, and in that silence, you need to steer it with the very subtle vrits of the Upanishads. You understand? You need to do that, because only those vrits, aham, brahmasmi, is going to establish this knowledge in regards to our true identity, nature, which is limitless. Therefore, it is purna, it's satisfying. You understand? So we somehow we need to get over the temptation to be stuck there in that silent mind, and then we need to bring the Vedantic vritis, and these vritis, they are there in the mind, and then in the beginning we make an effort to hold them. You remember Swami Paramarthananda described, defining what is Vedantic meditation. Oh, it's Nididhyasana. What is Nididhyasana? He says, is to sit in the silence of your meditation room, close your eyes and hold the thoughts around the features of consciousness as presented by the Upanishads. It's a homogeneous, flow of vrittis around the nature of myself, the nature of the self, the nature of conscious existence, remembering it, recalling the teaching. This is Vedantic meditation, and the mind needs to be very quiet, very, very quiet. You need a silent mind just to steer it a little bit with the Vedantic vrittis. You know, if we don't bring the Vedantic vrittis, which is the features and the natures of the self, and then you're going to enjoy an experience. And as we know, every experience, I mean, when we talk about beautiful experience, you know, we say, wow, I had a wonderful experience 1 hour ago. I had a wonderful experience yesterday. I have a wonderful experience last month. We always use the past tense when we recall our wonderful experience. Why? Because every experience is bound by time. So if we want to go beyond this frustration of the limitation which is inherent to any experience, and then we need to understand the difference between knowledge and experience, you know. And the Vedantic samadhi is a peace, is a state that Sukha, né? Is ultimate ananda, joy that comes from knowledge, not from experience. You understand? It's originated by this knowledge because I know what I am. So, and I am full, whole, complete, limitless, eternal, né? Simple, ordinary consciousness. So when you hold your mind at that knowledge, you know, you experience great satisfaction, great peace. It resolves the mind because it's an identity, it's a knowledge in respect to identity that somehow is going to destroy all the vrittis based on desires for completion. You understand? You know, I am whole, full, and complete. I am consciousness. I am the only reality. So this is the vrittis that are going to establish the yani in an ananda state, which is not linked to any experience. You understand? It's linked to the knowledge. It's a huge difference. And the sooner and the better we understand that, the stronger our value for knowledge rather than experience will develop. Anything else?
Thank you. So really beautiful. Adds a lot. It added for me a lot of dimension to that discussion. Dayananda never mentions Sahaja Samadhi, so that introducing that really helped me.
Yeah, Sahaja Samadhi is a natural. You see, even from Patanjali yoga, né? They talk about those things, but they have a different connotation. But I think Sahaja Samadhi is more from the Yani Yoga, not from Patanjali Yoga, because it's a natural samadhi, and Patanjali Yoga puts Nirvikalpa Samadhi as the ultimate goal of this spiritual process. Okay, in which the person experience this huge emptiness of no vrittis at all, no, and even the Aham goes with it, from what I understand. You understand? So, but the Sahaja Samadhi is the goal of every Vedantine. But before that, sometimes Swami Paramarthananda presents also the Saguna Samadhi, and then the Nirvikalpa is Savikalpa, not Saguna. Savikalpa Samadhi and Nirvikalpa Samadhi. And how he does present that? He presents like in the beginning, you have the knowledge is in your mind, but it takes effort to create that state, which is, you know, this flow of vrittis around the descriptions of the self, the features of the self. And then in the beginning, we have to put an effort. And then in another stage, this is the version of Vedantic Savikalpa and Nirvikalpa. In the later stage, the knowledge is so firm that any person sitting, quietly in Nididhyasana with this profound knowledge, immediately and effortless, experience that state of mental resolution without having to make an effort to remember or to recollect the nature, the features of the self, So, and then we have with effort, without effort, and then with effort, without effort. Without effort is already an expression of self-knowledge. And then what is Sahaja Samadhi? Is Samadhi in spite of all the vrittis, anattama vrittis that pops in the mind. You are living, you are interacting. There are all the anattama vrittis happening in your mind, but still your mind is resolved because of self-knowledge. Okay, so the socks.
Oh, sorry. In this verse, it's translated as being rooted therein, one never moves away from the truth of oneself. So that describes the Sahaja Samadhi.
But
yes.
By knowledge only.
Yes, yes.
It's only by knowledge, you understand? Because experience, the very nature of experience is change.
Yes, it says which is known by the intellect and which is beyond sense perception.
Absolutely, yeah. It's all about knowledge. In the beginning, it's a little bit strange because we were so conditioned to believe that enlightenment is an experience, And then we resist for quite some time, resist here, resist there, until we develop an understanding of the value of self-knowledge. For example, when we say 2 plus 2 is 4, so we have that knowledge is clear, it's firm, doubtless knowledge in respect to 2 plus 2 equal 4. And then if I'm having a very, very painful, emotionally, experience, and I'm suffering because something tragic happens to me. So what happens to my knowledge 2 plus 2 equal 4? It's there. Knowledge is knowledge, you understand? So experience, they happens in the mind, and they are linked to the objects of experience. Something bad happens, and then now my mind is depressed, is grieving, but it does not affect my knowledge. So a parallel we can take here. So I have self-knowledge, and something tragic happened to me, So yet does not affect my self-knowledge because they are two dimensions. One is, on the intellectual level, and the other is on the emotional level, experiential level. Experience changes all the time. Okay, it's ups and downs, pleasures and pains, but knowledge is that, as Ramji used to say, is that which is always good. You understand? So once you know, you know. Do you agree, Mark?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, it was very nice what you said about the 2 plus 2 is 4. Yeah, I get that, and that you hold on to the knowledge no matter what the situation.
I mean, if we hold on to experience, we are going to be pushed around by Parabada,
Yeah.
We have no control. So we want to hold on to a certain knowledge, which is the only knowledge, which is not a knowledge in respect to anattama, but it's about atma, that resolves the mind, pacifies the mind. Is the knowledge of my nature in Satya, which is not affected by my nature in Nitya. You understand?
Yeah.
Therefore, objects take on shapes. Carefully watch this absolute intelligence after eliminating all else from it. Intellectually, you understand, that consciousness is not this or that. This and that is just happening, and it needs to be rejected as anathema, as we know. So watch this intelligence. And then it says, watch it after you reject the reality given to all objects. So, and then you watch, and this watch, we can take it as watch it intellectually, but watch it, feel it, okay? Experience this consciousness, okay? Illumining and revealing your body mind and the experience through this body mind. So notice it. The same way we notice the physical light, we can notice, and if we carefully examine the nature of consciousness as the revealing power, just as a mirror takes on the shapes and colors of objects, so also the abstract consciousness assumes the different shapes of all objects by virtue of its holding them within itself. It's the very nature of consciousness to reflect the world of objects. The objects that they have colors and shapes, and they are just reflected in consciousness. And consciousness, as if holding everything, it's not really holding, because there isn't really everything. It's just like a mirage. But still, within the mirage, we take the mirage somewhat, as reality, so that we can prove its apparent reality to ourselves. So as if holding all the objects by its virtue, okay, the virtue of serving as a reflecting medium, or a screen on which Maya projects all kinds of images. Abstract consciousness can thus be made manifest by eliminating from it all that can be known. It cannot be known as such, this or that, for it is the illuminator, the supporter of all of that, as we know. This being the self of the seeker, this is important. This being the self of the very seeker is not cognizable objectively. So I cannot experience it objectively, and I cannot cognize it or know it objectively, but yet we saw in the previous verse that it can be known and it can be taught. There is such a thing as self-knowledge, otherwise all the gurus would never be through the age teaching this knowledge. So it can be known, but not objectively, because it's the very nature of the seeker, the very nature of the one searching its nature in consciousness. Investigate your true self in this manner. There is no other agent to know the self, nor light by which to know it. This is very important, because it clarifies the fact that by which means we're going to know the self. By which means? We say that there is a means by which we know the self, a pramana. This pramana is the scriptures, is the Upanishads. So by the scriptures, we're gonna know the self, okay? But there is no other agent to know the self. And this self it needs to be known by another pramana, which is the mind of the seeker. You understand? There is no other agent to know. The agent is the mind, the intellect of the seeker. Self-knowledge happens in the intellect. It is a knowledge in respect to the aham, which does not project aham in anything from the Mithya world, anathema. It holds the aham until it understands the aham. And where does this knowledge take place? It's in the intellect, in the mind. There is no other place to get knowledge. You understand? There is no other agent to know the self. It is the intellect, the human intellect. And there is no other source of light to illumine that. It self-illumines. And how it illumines itself through the subtle body of the Jiva Atma. It's going to bring, the Jiva Atma is going to experience the light of consciousness reflect into subtle body, and then the vrits that appears before this mind. So now we have the vrits in respect to the world, and then the vrits are pulled back to understand its very nature as consciousness. And which light we're going to use it? It's its own light, because it's self-luminous. There is no other light to show consciousness to us. It's our very light. I will say, no, there is a light. A light is the guru. The light is the scripture. Yes, it's okay. We can say that. But what is the ultimate pramana? When we start breaking down pramana, means by which we know things. There are many, many means by which we know things, which goes all the way down to our instruments of perception. But when we start looking into that which is the most fundamental pramana, it's consciousness, without which nothing can be known. So there is no other source of light. There is no other source of means by which we can have this consciousness, this knowledge in respect to our nature in consciousness. So by understanding that, with the aid of the Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana, you come to the understanding that you are not the body, you are not the sense, you are not the mind, because they are all transient. The body is composed by food, so how can you could be just a bag of food? So you are not the body, not the sense, not the mind. Yet this knowledge happens in the mind. We heard about in the past this vague and abstract notion that self-knowledge is the mind or the ego committing suicidal. You understand? Because the mind is going to be the instrument negating not this, not this, not this to everything, and in the end it has to negate itself. Okay, but it's not really a suicidal. You know, it's more like owning your superior nature as consciousness, the ultimate means by which you know. You know, I know I'm the mind. I'm all these riches and the sensation. No. Okay, this is my inferior nature, but my true nature is consciousness. So I'm not committing suicidal. So I'm not the mind. But this knowledge is only possible through the mind. So the mind has to be so self-reflective to the point of holding these subtle riches, which requires a very quiet mind, until it holds the knowledge and even gets a experiential sense of its true nature as this reflected light of consciousness. I have to correct myself here. You cannot experience consciousness, you can experience the reflection of consciousness as we know the objects of anathema. And then we have a sense of this reflected consciousness, reflect Brahman. Okay? Now you are not the body, you are not the mind, but you need the mind. All of these things are transient. The body is food. For the sense I, the ego, surpass the body. It's the most subtle, the ego, the I, the intellect. It's subtler than the body, the sense, and the mind at the time of cognitions of objects. So we have this sequence of the most dense to the most subtle. So the object, there is a thought in respect to an object, which is not different from the object, and then it comes through the sense organs, the sense instruments, comes through the mind, but then there is the ego or the I or the Jivatma, which is the intellect that is subtler than all the other means of knowledge. All pramanas, and then there is the sense. And then there is another pramana which is subtler than the ego, subtler than the intellect. The self always flashes as I, due to its self-luminosity. The body and such as things do not. So we are trying to establish the subtlety of the ego, of the intellect, which is reflected consciousness, which manifests as aham, I, due to its nature as consciousness. So aham is consciousness. The nature of aham is consciousness. That's why it shines with luminosity, which luminosity meaning consciousness. So we are self-conscious creatures. We experience this consciousness, although reflected in our subtle bodies, but it's the same nature as we know. So the self always will flash, shine as aham, due to its self-conscious luminosity. The body, on the other hand, does not have this luminosity, is inert matter, as we know. Therefore, the I, the ego, the subtle body, is superior to the physical body and the other means of perception of object. For the bodily conception does not exist with the perception of object. Otherwise, the two perceptions must be simultaneous. Now, this is very much aligned with what Dayananda was saying. It's saying here that the eye surpasses the body and everything else, the sense instrument, simultaneously with the perception of objects. We have the perception of object, and then for the bodily conception does not exist with the perception of object. So when we perceive the object, we don't perceive usually the body and the sense instruments, okay? So otherwise, the two perceptions would occur simultaneously, okay? But it does not happen, okay? So we perceive the body because we perceive one breath at a time, and then we perceive the other objects through the body. It's saying that the body, they do not have luminosity, self-luminosity, okay? So they are not self-luminous, no? So the consciousness is, and then the intellect, which is reflect consciousness, yes, it illumines its environment, okay? It illumines its field of experience, no? So it's a simultaneously with the perception of object. For the bodily conception, even the concept that the body does not exist simultaneously with the perception of object. So it means that consciousness reflects in my mind through the physical body, and the physical instruments are going to perceive the object, but these vritis, they occur one at a time and not all together at the same time. The contention may be made that the eternal flash of consciousness as aham is not apparent at time of perception of objects. So that's what Maya tricks us to come to this understand. So no, what is this consciousness? That the eternal consciousness flash as aham, but it does not appear. I'm perceiving the objects, they are not my objects, and I'm not even perceiving my body. And I'm not perceiving the mind, and much less the consciousness. So what is this consciousness? I don't get it. I don't cognize this consciousness. So the contention may be that the eternal flash of consciousness as aham is not apparent at the time of perception of objects. If I did not shine forth at the time of perception, the objects would not be perceived, just as they are invisible in the absence of light. So the same thing. So the same thing connect to what Mark said yesterday or the other last week. No? So you cannot reject consciousness. the objects would never be perceived. So I'm not perceiving consciousness. I'm not perceiving the physical body. I'm not perceiving my mind. Okay, but I know that this chain of brahmanas must be lined up so that I perceive the riches of the object. So I perceive that, therefore, you know, everything is in place. So otherwise I would not perceive anything out there. Why is not this consciousness, self-luminous consciousness apparent? Why? Now, this is a question many people ask. Why it's so difficult to not discount this consciousness? No? Why it's not so easily understood and held at all times? You know, why I have to miss again and again this light of consciousness? And then the author says, perceptibility is always associated with insentient matter. Okay, so our instruments of perception, they were designed to perceive the elements, okay, the subtle and the dense elements. So they are designed to capture an Atma object. They are not designed to capture Atma. So why we don't perceive Atma? Because we don't have instruments by which we can perceive the Atma. Then we say the Atma is beyond knowledge. No, it's beyond knowledge through the five senses and the mind, okay, as an object, because these five senses and the mind, they were designed to perceive objects, and the Atma being visible, it's not captured by these instruments. What is it? Oh, perceptibility is always associated with insentient matter. We have these five organs of experience, and they are designed to capture their respective anatma object. Okay, so a sound object is going to be perceived by my ears, and my eyes is going to perceive another kinds of aspects of objects, and same way all the other three sense organs. So they are designed for that, and that brings that situation, that playful joke that says, no, I mean, Ishvara must have made a mistake, and then he just threw the Vedic scripture, the Vedantic scriptures, as the pramana, the means by which we can know the self. You understand? Because otherwise we don't perceive this eternal, ever, never not present light of consciousness shining at all time. Perceptibility is always associated with matter and objects, insentient matter. Who else could see the self-luminosity of the self? Yeah? So who is going to see it? Only light can see the light. No? The light of consciousness is going to see itself. How so? Through the mind, through the intellect, but by which light? Its own light as consciousness. So the moment that you see your true nature, you have shifted your identity from reflect consciousness to original limitless consciousness, because you can only see from that standpoint. Who else could see one's self-luminous self? It cannot shine in absolute singleness and purity. However, it is there as I. It cannot shine as absolute consciousness, but somehow, however, it's there as aham, as the Jiva Atma, as reflected consciousness. So the self can never really shine in its absolute nature. But how it's going to shine? As the Jiva Atma, Atma never shines by itself. It can only shine as the Jiva Atma. Okay? So, and this is the Aham. And that's why the Aham, by its own light as consciousness, can know I am that consciousness. Anything from you guys? Am I going too fast?
I was wondering when you were reading that sentence, Arlinda, if it's always shining in absolute singleness and purity, it's just as Jiva Atmas, we haven't got there's no Jiva Atmas that have the sense perceptibility to be able to see it. But actually, it's always shining as that purity.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, it means to say, I mean, the whole key here is like the whole creation is designed for the sake of reflect consciousness, recognize its nature as original consciousness. Okay, reflect consciousness is the Jivatma. Brahman is Paramatma. So everything is for the sake the Jivatma recognize its very light. Okay, so how it's going to shine consciousness as human consciousness, as self-conscious, intelligent creatures such as humans in this planet. So it cannot shine otherwise. It even shines as the entire apparent universe, okay? Because the universe is going to be superimposed in consciousness and it shines. But the whole game here, the whole purpose here is to establish this identity, Jiva-Atma is Paramatma, you understand? So it cannot shine in absolute singleness and purity without the aid of Jiva-Atma. However, it's always there as Jiva-Atma, the reflected consciousness. Why we don't get it? Why it takes some work and time to get it, you know? It's old habit, mental extroversion, all the time, moving, trying to figure out what's happening in anatoma. And until I developed the maturity to understand that there is nothing in anatoma that is going to resolve myself, my mind, pacify and make me a happy jiva. So this outwardly tendency is the problem. And this is a huge vasana. Vasana for what? For experience. I want to experience. So, I mean, experience is in duality, experiencer and object of experience. So this is samsara. Yes, and I love experience. I want to experience a lot of spiritual purna, etc. Punya, sorry. But it's still, it's extroverting my mind. So I need to hold the aham to an extent that I don't let it go to any object of experience, even beautiful, subtle objects of experience. So otherwise it would have been easy, but it's not very easy. I don't know. The other day I heard Swami Paramartananda saying that some text that was making the analogy of the lake and the surface of the lake, and then and making the analogy with the mind of the yoni. And then it was interesting because in the text they were using the mind of the yoni to point out to a lake surface without ripples. And he was saying in those days, there were so many yonis that they used the example of the yoni to explain a lake that works as a reflecting medium. And then he was saying nowadays there are so little yonis that we use the analogy of the lake to try to give an example of the mind of the yoni. So why we don't? Because the mind is full of vrittis, anatima vrittis, creating these ripples that produce so many images, so many thoughts, and distract the mind into the anatima world. So that's why we have to go through the whole process of purification of the mind. And that's why in Vedanta, in Bhagavad Gita, in the chapter 6, there is a place for upasana, for meditation, dhyana, because you need to somehow produce a silent mind, a quiet mind. But the tragedy is that in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, they think that that is a thing, an end by itself, you understand? And in Vedanta, we say you need to produce a silent, quiet mind, but then you need to steer it with the teachings. So we need to work on purifying the mind, and meditation is a great tool. I like Karma Yoga, the understanding of the Ishvara system that is going to address the problem of desires and expectations in respect to my actions, to gain my objects of desire. So all of that has a very beautiful power to reduce extroversion, mental extroversion. Moreover, who else could see the self-luminosity of the self, if not the self itself? Because the reflect self is seen, its true source of luminosity. It's the aham, it's the I. Moreover, everyone feels I see the anatima world, the objects. If it were not for the eternal light of consciousness, the aham, these aham, they have light. We see that there are two reflecting mediums by which Maya brings about Jagata and Jiva. This reflecting medium, actually, it brings about Ishvara as well. So this reflecting medium is the Prakriti of Maya, which is the macrocosmic reflecting medium. And then it's going to bring Jiva and Jagata. And then Jiva is going to produce other reflections, and these reflections is the aham we see in every jiva atom, body mind complex, and this aham illumines. I illumine my environment. I guess you don't. You illumine your house, Lynn? It's your reflect consciousness that illumines. Okay, I'm sustaining my house because I'm conscious of my house and I'm doing what it takes to hold my house clean and so on. So we are illumining our environment. If we're not for the eternal light of consciousness, okay, which somehow shines in the Prakriti of Maya, and then subsequently it shines because it's all pervasive in my micro Prakriti, which is my subtle body, to produce another reflector. So we have the huge reflector, which is Maya, produces Ishvara, Jiva, Jagata, and then we have the micro reflectors, which is the subtle body of every intelligent living creature. And then we illumine. If it was not for the eternal consciousness of the aham, I, there would always arouse the doubt, if am I or am not? I am or am not? Do I exist or I do not exist? Which is absurd. So there is an eternal, limitless consciousness which somehow shines as the ahamkara. And if I was not this conscious existence, if this aham would not be satchit, conscious existence, it would have doubts in respect to its existence or non-existence. Do you understand? Do you agree? Huh? So I know that I know that I exist. And how so I exist? How so I am consciousness? So I know that I exist. So it can only be because this aham shines with the eternal light of consciousness, without which I would have even doubts in respect to whether I exist or I do not exist. These are beautiful logics to just bring to our attention, the on which basis this knowledge, edify, how you say, brought up or raised. So it's based on beautiful analysis, Upanishadic logic, that we need to have a certain subtlety of intellect and appreciation for these expositions. And this is what's going to build the foundation of self-knowledge. All these small little logics are going to build a foundation on which our self-knowledge becomes solid, hard, and firm. Nor should it be supposed that I is of the body at the time of perception of objects. For perception implies the assumption of that shape by the intellect, as is evident when I identify the body with the self. Nor should it be, so we should not suppose that I don't exist, neither I should suppose that the I is the body. When I perceive the objects, I should never perceive I, the body, perceive the object. We know that there is something other than the body, more subtle, more essential, which surpasses the body, as it was said in the previous verse, which is the ahamkara, which is fundamentally is limitless consciousness. And then it says, for perception implies the assumption of that shape by the intellect. So I'm not remembering this passage of that shape. Let me see the Portuguese version. Help me out if you can. Which verse is that? Oh, it's a long verse, 24.
Is he just saying that the vritti takes on the shape of the object?
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
perception implies the assumption of that shape by the intellect, yes, as is evident when I identify the body with the self. Yes, thank you. Very simple. Yeah, the body, the intellect is going to take the vritti in respect to an object, and then we have the perception and the vritti coming simultaneously, and that is possible due to the identification of the I am the body. Superimposition identify the body with the self. Is that what it's saying? So it's challenging the reality of the world as we perceive through the five senses. The perception implies that a certain assumption. Which assumption? That the shape, all the objects that are captured by the intellect, they are real, as is evident when I identify the body with the self. Is it something on those lines? Can you help me on this one? Otherwise, I'm going to read it. The translation in Portuguese is very good. Somebody did this long ago in Brazil. Ok, pode ser objetar. Eu abri, né? Yeah, so we should never suppose that the I is the physical body in the moment of perception of objects. Why? Because perception implies that the intellect takes the shape of the namarupas, as is evident when we identify the physical body as the self. So we perceive, perception implies that the intellect takes the shape of the anatma object. And then he says, as is evident as when we identify the physical body with the self. So we collapse the body as the self, and then perception implies the object. So it's a little more complicated. There are two notions there. So you guys feel free to help me out.
Is it trying to say, Arlindo, that we perceive the body actually as the form of the body, in the shape of the body, whereas the pure intellect doesn't have any form at all? The self doesn't. So we can't, because we can perceive the body shape, it proves that the body's an atma, so to speak.
Well,
okay, let's carry on here. Thank you, Mark. And then it says also, we should not say at the moment of perception that I am Mark, for example. So the Shaitra is a name of a feminine popular name in India. So I shouldn't say at the moment of perception that I am the name, Mark. The sense I am Mark surpass the sense of I, but the sense of I is not lost by the sense of Mark. Okay. You get that? So he talks about the identification with the physical body, and then he gives a further example here that says, for example, if I call my body Mark, yeah, a sense of Mark surpass the sense of I, but my sense of I is never lost because of my identification as Mark. It's not lost by the sense of Mark. Exists a continuity of this I also in the sleep, deep sleep, and in samadhi. It's never lost. Those are good passages. So I want to start this passage, and then we're going to revisit in the next class. Okay. And guys, if you please also start it so that we can work it together. Using the Portuguese translation helps, but that's we're gonna need to burn a little bit of neurons there to get the picture of what the author is painting there. And for your information, I'm traveling this Thursday, so our next class would need to be Friday, when I am at my brother's home visiting my father there. So would that work for you guys Friday?
works for me.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, that's fine for me. Fine for me as well, Arlindo.
Okay. Well, I lost Sylvia here. I don't know if she left earlier or what it was. Okay. So I'm gonna send the note on the WhatsApp. We meet again this coming Friday. All right? Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate Om Shanti 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 Namaste. Thank you. Thank you, my sisters, because last class I think I said no, today I said thank you, hello brother. So now I'm gonna say sisters to balance my mistake before, and better say thank you. I cannot even use the plural anymore. Huh? Thank you, brother and sister. Namaste.
Thank you. Thank you, Alinda.
Thank you.
God bless.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.